Hi, I'm AMFT.
Hi, I'm Judy Yen, and we are two licensed marriage family therapists.
The Session Will podcast was created for pre-licensed clinicians, licensed clinicians, and the everyday Joe. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the Session Will podcast. You just heard our intro on the way in. My name is AMFT. I have my amazing co-host.
I'm Judy Yen.
And then today we're sitting down with, we shouldn't have favorite guests, but she's definitely up there. And who are you, amazing guest?
I am Vanessa Cardin. I'm an associate marriage and family therapist. I'm also the co-founder of Cozy offices in Anaheim Hills. I also am the director of sponsorship on OC Camp, and I help facilitate leader training at Bloom Foundation. So I'm kind of all over the place, but yeah.
So just a few things.
Just a few things.
You're not busy at all.
Oh
no,
my gosh.
I have so much time.
I do want to just do a short plug here of the fact that Cozy is how I launched my private practice. I wouldn't actually be where I am in my private practice without Cozy. It was an amazing resource, not only for my clients, but for myself to have just a turnkey office to step into. They have this amazing scheduling calendar app thing that literally I would have people call me up. Hey, can you do a session right now? Or jump on the calendar. I can. Boom, book a room. And before I was there, my client was ready to go. So if you haven't used Cozy in Orange County and Anaheim Hills, I definitely recommend taking a peek. It is a great way for a person starting out, trying to build a client load, to slowly build themselves into being their own boss. So,
and it's a beautiful, beautiful space.
Oh, absolutely.
Vanessa has great style, as you can see by her background.
I think I paid you to say that.
No, she did not. And I've always been humble and grateful for the fact that, again, it was amazing space, amazing resource. And I wouldn't have been able to launch my private practice in the middle of a pandemic without it. So that was the big takeaway. And I will always be appreciative of that. But the real reason we have Vanessa on again, if you've been listening to our podcast, she's not a first timer. She's been here now twice. We brought her back because she is just a bold, passionate, and authentic person. I don't think you can actually describe who Vanessa is if you haven't ever met her, because there's like words don't do her justice just because of the way she is. And so Judy and I were sitting around, and Judy had actually been having a conversation with Vanessa and was like, hey, come back on the podcast. And it was just like, where are we going to go from here with it? What can we do? We could go all sorts of different directions. And I was like, no better person to talk about just being authentically yourself in the therapy space.
Yes. Vanessa is definitely someone, like, not even just in the therapy space, but just in everyday life. Like, she's the extrovert that, like, I'll text and be like, oh my gosh, can you come with me to the networking event? Because I hate them and it's super awkward. So you can just be my friend buffer and I just stand right next to you. But she's just awesome and authentic and just super real. And so with that type of personality, like, I'm sure, just in society, we always talk about authenticity and like, I want to be with a real person and, I don't like fakeness, but a lot of times that authenticity can be actually a challenge, or just kind of an interesting journey to navigate in the therapy space with our clients, because do we show up like truly authentically ourselves in the room? And that was just something that we wanted to discuss with Vanessa. So how have you navigated that?
First of all, you guys are so sweet. Oh my gosh. I'm like, I should come on your podcast more. So affirming. So great. Yes. Okay. So I am, like you guys said, I'm very authentic. I'm very real. And a lot of clients will come to me, or usually the phone consult, if they have been in therapy before. Connect my phone and my computer. So if it rings, sorry. And so a lot of clients will tell me on the phone, I was seeing a therapist before. Mm-hmm. And I feel like she just kind of sat there and said, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? And I'm looking for someone they'll use the word, I'm looking for someone to give me advice. Which I don't do, which we don't do, but I will tell my clients on the phone, I will definitely say more than that. I will definitely say more than how do you feel about that? Because I believe it's important for your client to feel like you're human in the room as well, and not just a robot, which we can get more into that. But Yeah, I mean, where do you guys want to start with? Because I can go all over the place. So where do you want to start with the authenticity?
Well, so what you just said there, you were doing a great lead in of like, you know who you are, you know your superpowers as a clinician. And I know I use that phrase and people go, what do you mean superpowers? But we each have these like intrinsic talents that only we have. I can never be Judy. I can never be you, Vanessa. So you have these things that you've decided, I'm actually going to use these to my advantage as strengths and how I meet people. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage and also vulnerability. I mean, it's easy for us to sit here, the three of us, and not hype each other up, but talk about the accolades that maybe we've gotten over the period of time that we've invested in this industry. But no one ever talks about the struggle, the tears, the times that maybe we weren't encouraged to be our authentic selves, whether that was as a therapist or as a person in the outside world, whatever that might be. And I want to create a space for people who are listening to realize that if you're feeling these challenges, if you feel like you don't fit into a cookie cutter, then stop being a cookie cutter. Be you. Maybe you're not going to have those fine edges. Be you.
Yeah. I think so. When we all went to the same school, so we had the same training, and I loved being at Hope. I thought the training was really great. But something that they really reinforce is that you don't self-disclose at all, and that you don't cry, you don't, because you don't want your client to feel like what they're saying is too much for you. And so you learn, which honestly I think is good to learn right off the bat, because as a trainee, I don't think I would have known how to gauge what was appropriate. And I think now that I have a lot more experience, I can gauge what's appropriate or not. But I think what I wish I would have been taught that now I've learned is it depends on what your intentions are when you share. Self-disclosure is not bad if your intention is to bring humanity into the room, to bring vulnerability into the room, to bring connection to the room. If I'm self-disclosing because I feel uncomfortable and I don't know what else to say, and so I say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, me too, haha," that does not help my client. That soothes me. And what's important in the room is everything that you're doing as a therapist, even if you're bringing yourself in, it's for the sake of your client. And so for you to be able to gauge if me being authentic right now helps my client, then awesome. If it does not, then don't do that. Showing tears. I specifically work with trauma. I hear really horrible things. When I first started, it probably would have been inappropriate to cry in session, right? Because my tears would have been really overwhelming. Like they wouldn't have been like, "Oh, that's sad." I would have been like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible." So it was good for me to learn as a trainee to not self-disclose, to not show emotion, because I didn't know how to do that. Now I've heard so much that I know I don't feel the urge to cry hysterically in the room. But if my eyes water, that's totally appropriate. That's human, right? And I can share with my client, "Gosh, what you just shared with me makes me feel really sad. I feel really sad for you right now." And to have that emotion is healing for your client. So I think experience plays a role, but the self-disclosure piece, I don't want to promote, self-disclose, it's fine. It's your intention, and it takes skill and experience to figure out when to self-disclose and when that's appropriate.
Absolutely. I think you worded that perfectly.
Right. I think what I loved what you said was when to self-disclose. Like, are we doing it for us, and our own comfort level, our own needs, or is it for the client? And sometimes too, the self-disclosing isn't actually comfortable for us in the room, but we can tell it's actually very healing or therapeutic for them. I can just self-disclose, like I remember, like, I met my husband on Bumble, which is like an online dating website. And like, yeah, for the longest time, that was like super embarrassing for me because online dating wasn't like as, I guess like normal as it is now. And I remember I would have clients come in, just even today, like they'll come in and they'll talk about how difficult online dating is and how nobody really understands unless they've done it. And so sometimes I sit there and I struggle. Do I tell them that that's how I met my husband? Or do I just kind of go, "Oh yeah, like that must be hard." And so something like that, something that's small, but like is actually important to me and a lot of the clients that are struggling in just the dating world. I have to pick and choose when I self-disclose that, or even if I do that. And it's not with every client. It's just, you have to, like you're saying, like with more training, you can kind of differentiate like when it's appropriate, and when it's actually going to be harmful. So it's like interesting to navigate that in the room.
Yeah.
I think though, Vanessa, you're absolutely right that in grad school, and I don't think it was just Hope centric, but I think in grad school at large, they always hammer in, don't self-disclose, don't self-disclose, don't self-disclose.
The ethics. Yeah.
And there is absolutely, don't hear us undermine that there is an ethical reason for this, but if all of a sudden a person feels like they're sitting with a robot, how really healing is that? If I just pour out my heart and soul to maybe my most traumatic experience in life, something that I have created maladaptive coping skills or haven't been able to increase daily functioning because of, and someone's like, well, tell me more. Is that reaffirming, or do I feel even further alone? And so there's this fine line of having to find out, well, wait a second, why do I do the things that I do? And yes, if you're sharing, if you're self-disclosing to take power away from your client and control the discussion, or you feel that insecurity like you'd pointed out, Vanessa, then you're in a completely wrong space. But I don't think there is anything wrong with being empathic with a person. Having I cut my teeth in this industry on dealing with victims of sexual abuse, and my youngest client was 4 years old. And I remember, again, I had an amazing supervisor, but I remember just doing play therapy with this child and some of the things that she was bringing up in play therapy. I couldn't help but cry. I didn't turn it into a me show where I'm just like, oh my God. I just, you're sitting there and you're still engaging, but the tears are rolling off of you and your heart is hurting because you're hearing the most vulnerable segment of our population talk about the worst atrocities that have been done to this person. And I remember my supervisor, Wayne Brazil, said, if you turn that side off of you, you will lose the ability to ever know what the correct intervention is. Because if you can't feel it, then how the heck do you know what is going to be the thing that's going to lead to growth and healing for that person?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of therapists fear self-disclosure or being authentic because we risk the credibility and the power that we have in the room as experts. So if I'm authentic and I share, now I'm not the expert. And that I personally did not become a therapist to play power games or be the expert in the room. I'm the expert because I have experience. I don't need to prove that. What's healing in the room is me being human and having two humans connect in regards to, I feel pain too. I feel emotion too. I don't need to be an expert, right? It's irrelevant. And so I think a lot of therapists have this like, oh, that I'm the hierarchy. I need to have it together. I need to be, and I don't want you to lose professionalism. But this idea, and I think that's why I'm a little bit more like, I guess, chill with my clients, because I don't have anything to prove. You're coming to me, you pay me for, the time that you spend with me. I don't need to prove to you that I have all this experience and I'm not going to cry because I'm so good at my job. Like, what is that? Like, that's my stuff. That's counterculture. And so I can humble myself and go, gosh, when I'm in therapy, I can feel that pain too that you feel. And then they go, you're in therapy? I'm like, yeah, we're all human.
Yeah.
Right? Of course I have a therapist. Do you know what I do for a living? I hear people's pain all day. Where do you think I put it? Right? And so now it takes the client from going, oh, you're perfect and you have it together and I'm weak, to, oh, we all don't have it together, right? And it removes this hierarchy. For me personally, I don't like the hierarchy in the room. I like the boundary. I like knowing that we're not friends, right? But this statue of give me advice, you have it together, help me, you're the expert. No, I'm not going to give you advice. I don't know if you should break up with your boyfriend or not.
Well, I think you're also highlighting, whenever I have felt that dynamic, and it is interesting, especially when you first start seeing clients or you first become licensed, right? There's like an aura to you, like, yes, okay, so I'm like a really big Yoda, come to me and I will fix everything, and then life humbles you really quick because they drop
Uh-huh.
some bombs on you, like, well, shit, where is that in the book?
Right.
Like it just doesn't happen.
Jason,
Yeah,
you did not teach me
yeah, exactly. You gotta throw it up to all the law and ethics teachers out there. They always get phone calls. Hey, I haven't talked to you in 9 years, but I think I'm about to lose my license. So, but when you get into this power fight, right? It's really how I've conceptualized it is it's an adversarial role, because all of a sudden it's not about sharing space. It's about projection. Because are they saying things because they want to see my response? Oh, wow. Yeah, you did great. Okay, good. They think I'm a good person. Oh, wow. Judgment, shame, embarrassment. You didn't do that right. Oh, God, I'm such a terrible person. That's sometimes the client wants to put you in that spot. Sometimes as human beings, we want those type of relationships because it's a lot easier to take the shame, blame, and guilt and step into a position of vulnerability with maybe like a complete stranger and talk about how I really feel. There's not many spaces for us to do that in society, and we're not used to that in regular relationships. So sometimes we bring that same toxicity with us into the therapy room as clients. I want you to treat me and berate me like I have in the past. Well, then you don't want to grow, and you're paying me $150 an hour to not grow. That's
Right.
unethical. I'll probably fire you before you fire me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. The irony is that what our clients are struggling with in society is what we're struggling with in the room, right? Society tells us don't be vulnerable, don't, that's weakness, don't show emotion, perfectionism is the goal. And so our client comes in and we ask them, hey, be imperfect, be vulnerable, show emotion, but I can't because society told me I can't. Right? The irony.
Right.
And so by giving permission to myself to be vulnerable and authentic gives them permission to also be vulnerable with themselves, right? And now you have two authentic people who are both being vulnerable and human. And for me, I believe the vehicle of change is human connection. So now we just built human connection. I don't have to share my trauma with my client. That's irrelevant. But I can share emotion. I can share, hey, that made me feel really sad for you. Or, hey, you said something last session and it kind of hurt my feelings. Right?
Right. Yeah.
We have talked about this in we have a cozy gathering. We meet once a month to support each other as therapists. And there have been times where I've sat in that group. I'm like, guys, my client like really hurt my feelings. Like straight up, like I left session feeling really insecure and she really challenged me and that really hurt me. And I think Judy, said, you should tell her that. You should tell her. And I was like, I don't want to tell her because I lose power if I tell her. Right. And so I ended up telling her and it was a good it was good, but realness came out. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't rainbows and butterflies. I don't want to sit here and lie to you that when you're honest, it's a good session. It's not always good. But humanity came out. Oh my gosh. My therapist just called me out. My therapist just highlighted that I might hurt people. And she literally said, do you think I'm doing this to other people? And I said, probably. And it's kind of icky, right?
Yeah.
And so wrestling through that's therapy. That's healing. But I have to be vulnerable to do that. Right?
Or how many times have you guys ever been called out by your clients? That sucks too. Like when they point out my mistakes, I'm like, oh, because like my own stuff, like my initial reaction is I want to be perfect too. I want to be put together. I want to look as though I don't make mistakes as a therapist. But a lot of times when they've called me out, it's like super uncomfortable. But guess what? Like we own it. Because if I don't own it and just say, hey, yeah, you know what? You're right. Like they're not going to feel connected to me. They're going to be like, okay, well, she's just being fake and she's not going to take responsibility. So now my healing has basically stopped here.
Well, it's another authority figure that's going to dismiss what they bring up. I mean, and when they see us actually humble ourselves to the point of like, okay, let's process this. Then all of a sudden, what I love in that moment is you can see the client realize that there's maybe a space that they haven't ever really entered. And the fact that I'm calling out someone of authority or someone that I truly take their word for significant value, and they want to hear about potentially a blind spot for them. because there's so much of like those relationships. Imagine like trying to go to your parents and have that discussion, or siblings, or, you know, again, mentors, other people that may have hurt you in your life, and for you to actually call them out on the carpet per se. Most of the time it doesn't go well. Most of the time phone clicks, most of the time you left on red, you get ghosted somehow. So the fact that we actually can sit there and go, well, please, like, I would love to know more. Can you help me out with that? I've seen more buy-in, more growth, and then also that individual starts to actually advocate for themselves. I think if you're sitting with clients and you're constantly trying to get them to advocate for themselves and they never challenge you, you're doing probably a terrible job as a therapist.
I agree.
Because so self-disclosure here, I'm ending my work at an agency. I'm going to go full-time private practice. And so I'm in the last 4 weeks, it has been the processing of closing all these cases. And that is a significant abrupt stop sometimes to therapy, maybe not in the perfect arc of where you would stop in therapy. I would make the argument there's no real good time to stop, it seems, ever, because life will always throw you challenges. Just when you think you get it perfect, all of a sudden something comes in. But I had a client totally explode on me yesterday, and rightfully so. I wouldn't say that this individual was off base at all. You know, when you're right in the middle of the journey with someone and then all of a sudden life happens, right? I have to advocate for myself as a therapist, be authentic to myself. So what I ask of my clients, if I can't even advocate for myself, how much of an imposter then am I with my clients, right? But there's a lot of, well, it's right, you're leaving right in the middle of the journey. And I had to own that. And I tried to do it to the best that I could, of saying, I know this wouldn't be the time that anyone would say, let's go ahead and stop. But unfortunately, life does not give us the space to grow in the same space that comfort exists. And it was one of those that afterwards, you know, you sign it. I largely do virtual sessions, signed off this session, and I had to take 5-10 minutes, take a deep breath and like think, because we can't also treat ourselves as therapists that like our clients don't matter to us. Like, if our client is literally just like a cell phone provider to us, and we're just like, well, they pay their monthly fee and they come in and then they leave, man, the rapport in therapy must not be that strong. If they just see themselves as a customer, I think you provide something deeper than that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And I think you mean something small too. Like, have you guys ever been told, like, are you tired today? Like, have you ever, and you were actually tired, or like you zoned out, like you legit zoned out and they called you out on it? Like, that's uncomfortable. It's like, oh shit, sorry. You're right. I am tired.
Damn, that would be, I have not had that. Have you had that?
Had the, not the zoning out one, but the like you look maybe like you look tired, or are you distracted? Like, are you not super present right now in the room? And I would say at first my first reaction is like, no, like I'm totally with you, I'm tracking. But then I admitted it and I was like, no, you're right. Like, I apologize. And I would offer, if I think that's only happened once. And I basically just said I was sorry. And you know what? Like, this session, like, don't even worry about it. Like, there's no fee for this session because that's on me. I showed up today not, as present as you deserve, and that is a disservice to you. But I could have just lied and been like, no, and just like taken the money and been like, we're still working. But no, I just felt like, because if I would have been on the other end, I would have been able to feel it and I would have hurt my feelings and I probably wouldn't have come back.
And what you did in that too is you validated them picking up on something.
Yes.
Right. So by saying, no, I'm fine, you're not helping them grow, because they walk away going, well, I felt like she was off, but she said she wasn't, and I trust her. Why would she lie to me? So I can't trust my gut. I can't trust my what I'm feeling, which is exactly what we're trying to work on in therapy, is trusting yourself. Right?
Exactly.
Saying, yeah, you're picking up on something. Or I've gone back. I haven't had a client say that necessarily, but I have noticed, gosh, I had a bad day yesterday and my sessions, I was not a good therapist. So I'll bring it up in session. Hey, last week I recognized I was not, on my A game. I said this and was that hurtful to you? And more times often than not, they'll say like, oh no, I didn't notice, or it was fine. But I'm allowing repair work to take place.
Right.
Because if they left feeling, gosh, Vanessa seemed off today, I want to validate that what you were picking up on was accurate. It's important for me that that when your gut is going off, that I don't like to use the word gaslighting because I feel like that's intense, but I don't want my clients to feel like what they're feeling isn't real.
Right.
That I'm making them second guess themselves, right? Because I'm human. I'm tired. I had a bad day, right? So I apologize, but what you picked up on was accurate. What's it like for you to sit with someone who feels like they're not engaged in what you're saying? That must be really hard, right? Great. Awesome session.
Well,
right. And also just even asserting the fact, like just even asserting your needs and being able to, because a lot of times that is what we do in therapy, is to teach them assertiveness and boundaries and, vocalize your needs. Like you deserve that. And for them to be able to actually like have the courage to say it to us in the room, to me, that's like, oh my gosh, we're making progress.
Yeah.
Because if you can say it to me in this room, that means when you go outside, you're going to be able to start doing that with everybody else in your life. And to me, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Like, whoo, therapy's working.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and it comes back to that realization that the therapy space should absolutely be one of the safest interpersonal relationships that person has in their life at the present. And so if in that space we're not able to actually let someone come in, question us, make comments on what they're seeing and feeling, then man, how are they ever going to do it outside of that room? I mean, and definitely with the tiredness, I've been called out on being tired before, and it would be really easy to sit back and be like, no, I'm good. And be like, no, you know what? It is the end of the day, but sitting with the client being like, so what was your day like? And normally it can be like, okay, so we're two humans who are tired. So I've actually been like, hey, how about we get up and move around for a second? And I'll never forget, one of my clients was like, I really do need to take a walk around this building. Like, perfect. Let's do a power walk.
Yeah.
It's just two dudes going around a building in Fullerton. And then we come back, sit down. We're like, all right, okay, let's go ahead and do this.
Right.
What is it also? It was a huge intervention that we'd been talking about using throughout my time with that individual of, hey, when you need a little more clarity, let's get up, let's walk around, let's get some sunlight, let's come back, let's solve this problem. And we were able to actually acknowledge we both needed it,
Yeah.
But Vanessa, I do have a question for you, and it's the one I've wanted to go at because of just the trifecta of everyone on the podcast today. But you as just an individual, you have this personality that is so just unique to you. And we've talked about, for the three of us before, how having unique and maybe bold personalities to some led to challenges in growing up, maintaining relationships, even getting into the field of therapy, because maybe we were willing to be more vulnerable at certain ways where people said, well, that's not traditional therapy, so you don't really have a place here. And so I know we are not singularities. I know that the best thing about the therapy field right now is more and more people are coming into it with the objective of trying to be helpful, not hurtful, and trying to create again, space for individuals to have meaningful change and impact the lives that they live. How have you navigated this just on your personal journey? Because like in no time, one day we're going to be saying, this is the licensed marriage and family therapist, Vanessa.
So soon.
She's in Anaheim Hills. It's not just easy, to get to here.
So specifically, you want to know how I got to this point?
Yeah. I mean,
what have you ever faced challenges being your authentic self?
Yes. I for a long time, so I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, which is the challenger. obviously. And for a long time, I always felt like, why am I always the problem? Like, why is it that everyone either doesn't see it the way I see it? And why is everyone okay with things going the way that it's going when it's wrong or when it's not fair, when there's not justice? And why do I always have to be the problem? Like, why do I always have to be the one to speak up and get in trouble? And even in grad school at Hope, I can probably guarantee that there's professors that do not like me. And you know what, I'm in a place now in my life where I don't really care if people like me, because not everyone's going to, and that's okay. And I just always want to advocate for honesty and justice and fairness. And if you don't like me, I've learned to be okay with that. It's hurtful. Like if someone says, gosh, Vanessa is such a burden, or Vanessa's a lot. I get that a lot. Vanessa's a lot. Why can't you just go with the flow is what I get a lot too. And that's just not who I am. But that's what makes me a really good fucking therapist, because I challenge the shit out of my clients. I challenge the shit out of culture and society, right? And so I've learned to just become okay with, that's what I bring to the table in every relationship that I have. And that's okay if not everyone likes me. But I lost a lot of opportunities because of that. I think immaturity plays a role in that. Professionalism, learning how to be professional when you state your opinions, I learned over time. All right. So I lost opportunities, like job opportunities that maybe I could have gotten because I was seen as maybe difficult to work with. I'm not really like someone that kisses ass. And so I think, but now I've learned to like know when to speak, know how to speak, right? Before, when I was younger, there was like an immaturity of, I felt the need to speak all the time, picking my battles and stuff now. So yeah, I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I'm in therapy. Obviously, I've been seeing my therapist for like 10 years and she's amazing. And I go in there, I'm like, I'm a mess every session, every week. I'm like, I'm a mess. I'm all over the place. I pissed someone off this week. Someone's mad at me. I'm a mess. And it's just like, yeah, but that's also what makes you you. And that's what, I don't know. You just learn to start liking yourself. So
that absolutely answers it. Exactly how I was asking the question. Because the coolest thing about our friendship, I think, Vanessa, is you have been authentically the same person from the moment we started knowing each other at Hope to the moment now that we're on a podcast together. And I can align with a lot of your story. And having, I'll tell you, I might not have sent you the emails or the DMs of like, I see it, but I can understand to some level what it feels like to be that person who's willing to speak without raising their hand. Like, I'm not going to necessarily ask permission to say what I'm going to say because I feel like I have something reasonable to say here now. And like you said, it's a difficult balance to learn because there is an immaturity that we have to recognize in ourselves. Because, well, wait a second, am I trying to affect change or am I trying to beat the crap out of someone? Like it always, that cathartic release of comebacks has always been a struggle for me. Okay. Always a struggle. Okay. Oh, I'm not going to go into that story. But anyways, no, I embarrassed the crap out of my wife the other day. It was hysterical, but it's all good. Well, now I have to say it or people be like, oh, he's rude. So anyways, if you don't know me, I have a truck that's an older truck. The paint's peeling, but I absolutely love my truck. And I'd rather buy a house than paint my truck right now. And so it's this kid, this brat, personal life stuff, riding his bike around, right? And he stops and he says, I'm working on the truck. He says, oh no. He says, my dad says that's the ugliest truck in the neighborhood. And it was again, Adam had low bandwidth. He had just seen a bunch of clients. I'm just doing my own thing. I said, well, you can tell your dad. Yeah. I said, well, you can tell your dad I'd rather have an ugly truck than an ugly wife. And so
oh my God.
And
oh my gosh.
I get to bring the wife involved.
like, and so it was just hysterical to watch
Oh.
sort of the facial change there, and then they don't walk this loop anymore for some reason, so I don't know what happened there, but again, that was not me in the right space. I should have just said, yeah, it's an ugly truck, but we all fall short of the glory of God. And anyways, but that's like a part of who we are in it, right? And so it's also reflecting on, why do I do the things that I do? And I realized that a lot of times when I would burn relationships or be extra, it wasn't necessarily putting myself in a spot of good reflection with others. You know, how am I going to be experienced? And now sort of watching you go along through this process of, well, of like, you know, we'll find ways that we can interact authentically in the communities that we exist, but while also not hiding who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, yeah, I was gonna say, like, out of the three of us, I watch you two and I'm like, oh, I'm not like them. Right. But there's parts of me that admire those parts of you that I wish I was more like that. Like, just hearing you guys talk of like I'm the complete opposite. I don't ever say anything. Right. I'll say it to you guys because you're my friends, but like in society, I'm like, nice. Like, Judy's nice. She's friendly. She goes with the flow. She's not necessarily, she doesn't really stand out. Like, I'm just like kind of passive and I kind of fly under the radar. And because I'm like that, I do get opportunities because I'm like easy to work with, right? Like, that's who I am. But is that who I really am? No, because guess what? I go and I complain to you guys, or I'm like, and I'm all upset. Like, why doesn't anyone like care what I think? Oh, because you're not sharing what you think. Oh, okay. Well, that makes more sense. So mine's like the opposite. Like, I struggle with being more authentic and being real and being assertive, and because I am afraid that someone's not going to like me. And so watching you speak and like listening to you, Vanessa, like, you've gotten to a place in your life where, you know what, like, not everyone's going to like you. That is like a huge transformation to get to that point. And like, I'm still on that journey. Like I'm like super old compared to the two of you.
Super.
Yeah.
So dramatic.
But it's like, I think being me and being like more passive and being like a 2 on the Enneagram, yes, I've gone opportunities, but I think for internal opportunities, I've lost out a lot too. Like, just for my own self, like contentment, all of those things. Like, so it's like, it's a struggle because, you have to figure out, like, how do you show up in society and as a therapist and as a friend and a partner and all those things. Like, how do you just be authentic in all parts of you and not just percentages of like here, there, and in different areas? It's like, because we teach our clients, you need to be authentically you all the time, like 100%. And as we're teaching them or like guiding them through that, like, we're also kind of going through our own journey as well. So it's just interesting, like, to like hear your guys' stories, because I would say that you two are probably more similar in your boldness, whereas I'm sitting here being like, I want to be bold too, but like, I'm not.
But so what's unique about what you're saying is boldness doesn't look like loudness, right? Like, I think
right. Like, I don't see it as loudness.
Yeah, like, because Adam and I are more vocal, but you being able to have discipline, right? That's boldness. Like, I don't have a lot of discipline. And a lot of the things I say, I think for Adam and I, default is word vomit. Like, we can what we think without, we don't have filters, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Right? That's default. So it takes a lot of work for me to be you, right? So the same effort that you
to you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, oh gosh, it takes a lot of work for me to be outspoken or whatever. And so it's just flipped. Right. But I have to learn, part of my journey was learning what is default for you, right? That, hey, it's not appropriate to always just open your mouth. It's not appropriate to talk to your professor like that. It's not appropriate. I remember one time in class, we were doing a PowerPoint presentation, and like, it was like a night class, and you could tell that she was just reading off the PowerPoint. And I was like, hey, so I'm going to go home, because if all we're going to do is read off the PowerPoint, I'd rather do this in my pajamas at home. Like, I can read, right? Like, I can read off the slide. And she didn't like it. She was like very upset with me for saying that. So like, knowing, like, hey, that wasn't appropriate to like talk to your professor like that, right? Like, I'm not, it might've been what everyone was thinking, but like,
right.
I didn't need to say it. But that's your gift, Judy, is knowing and having that discipline and having that intuition of like, now is not the time to do that. But when it is the time to do it, to have that strength, okay, now's the time, right? I do need to say, and that's going to be your challenge. And me and Adam, our challenge is to not tell people's wives that they're ugly, you know?
I'm sitting over here just like, I'm like, oh my God, I think my podcast career is over because I was genuine. No, but to really just put a disclaimer, I actually don't know what his parents look like. He just hasn't been rolling by the house anymore. But anyways, no, the other thing though that I think is another reason why I want to do this podcast is because I want to give people some hope in the realization that there's 3 private practices that are either started or are going to be born out of our 3 different individual lives of what we've done. And so, Judy, when I hear you talk about like, well, you know, I don't have the ability to just be verbose at times or have the boldness in being verbal, I also know that you have a practice that's built off of people that come seek you out for your superpower, you know, and that's, you laugh because you're like, it's not a superpower, but you have,
I'm like barely getting by, guys.
you have people coming to you because there's no way that Vanessa or I could ever be you. Right. We don't have that same level of diligence in understanding that situation. I'd be lost trying to find my way around in that situation. But that's what makes it so crazy and amazing for you, is because you're able to do that as a therapist. And that's what I think more people need to hear. I'm tired of people trying to be Freud 2.0. And I know everyone's like, Freud, but seriously, for some reason, we have this like, okay, well, I'm going to be the next Brene Brown. I'm not talking her down. She's amazing, but only she can be her. Okay. So how about we try to be who we are, something different? Because that's the thing. I'm hearing more from clients. And as I've tried to grow my private practice, it's pretty sad the things I hear when people call. Like whether they feel like, yeah, I spent a year with a therapist, I never felt connected because I didn't feel like I was interesting enough. What? You didn't feel like you were interesting enough to pay someone to hear you? Like that's a whole new level of pain. Or I had another one that they're like, and my therapist just said that it wasn't working. Well, what wasn't working? Like, oh no, I don't think it's working. Move on. I can understand that there's an ethical boundary there, that if we don't see progress, we need to probably end the therapeutic space. But sometimes it's in the coldness of trying to be a textbook that we're not getting these things across to our clients. And what happens? And they never come back to therapy. My number one worst fear as a therapist is that I could be the last therapist a person sees. I do not want to be the reason someone says, I don't think therapy works, because I sat down with the dude, Adam, and he sucked.
Yeah.
I want you to say, you suck, and I'm going to try find someone else. I'm up for that.
And let me help you find someone else. Like, I'm sorry that I sucked for you, but let me help you find someone that's a better fit for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the ego thing, right? Not wanting to be offended, like that I'm not good enough for my client. Like I tell clients all the time, you don't hurt my feelings. I don't get like, this is not about me. If you want a new therapist, great. Let's get you a new therapist. Like, you're not hurting my feelings. It's not about me.
Right.
So
but kind of going back to what you said earlier, Vanessa, I wanted to ask, you said that there was a transition for you from like your earlier, like as a trainee versus like now being almost licensed. Where in that transition and that journey did you realize at what point it was like you started to understand when it was appropriate to self-disclose or like be kind of just like yourself, like be knowing how to facilitate that in the room? Because yes, we're always ourselves, but like to do it appropriately, professionally.
Trial and error. When I was a trainee at Hope and we had to record our sessions and our supervisor would watch them, that's one.
I hated those.
That's one compliment that I remember. Carrie Hansen was my supervisor, and that was one thing she said that really stuck with me. Was she watched my video and she said, "You're exactly the same in your session that you are in front of me," and she said, "Don't ever lose that." And that, as a trainee, I always kept in mind because I thought that was the best compliment I could ever get. But she said you need to figure out how to, what was the word she used? Essentially like put boundaries around it a little bit, like clean it up. But she said, even the way you're sitting, the way that you're moving, the way that, because I would usually kind of put my feet on the chair. You can't see now, but sometimes I'll sit on my feet. Even the way I dress professional, but I don't wear heels in a full on professional suit, right? So I dress how I would probably dress if I was going to a nice dinner with my friends, right? Or a nice whatever. So I really am the same person in all areas. When it started to feel, I guess like that pivot point was when I got into private practice. I'm going to say this, and I really am a humble person, I promise. Okay. But as a clinician, to be in private practice and to see your phone blow up and to have 30 plus clients on your caseload that want to come every week for months after months after months, you start to go, maybe I am good. And that was the first time I thought, gosh, maybe I am a good therapist, because all the way up from that point, I was at a group practice that would give me clients. And so it was like, oh yeah, I have clients because they give them to me. And so in private practice, when I started getting clients on my own and keeping them, and then clients would say, gosh, you're so helpful. I feel like I'm growing so much. I started realizing me being me in this room really helps people, and they would refer their friends. A lot of my clients came out of referrals from them. And so I think that's when I started to feel more confident in like whatever I'm doing is working, and I can feel really secure in what I'm doing. And I'm actually really proud of the work that I do. And so I'm going to step into it more. I'm going to lean into it more. So probably 2 years ago, that was about 2 years ago, I started in private practice. So yeah, I think so.
It's amazing to hear how you verbalize your own journey in that, because I feel like there is a moment for all therapists that go into private practice that aha moment happens. And it's really important that we pay attention that sometimes we start off in private practice with this gut assumption that we're not good enough. Like you can tell it, you can really recognize how present it is if with every phone call you're immediately willing to take your sliding scale to the bottom. like you're like, you know what, let's do it for 15. like really it's that like, oh, I'm not worth it thing. But then there is a moment when the emails start rolling in, when the phone calls start happening, when you start carrying a caseload and the caseload doesn't go through the ebbs and flows, and it's just like steady.
You're like, oh shit, I have to work now.
Yeah, like, isn't that the funny part? Especially in private practice, you're like, oh, I've got 3 free days out of a 5-day work week. Like, and then all of a sudden you're like, I had to work 4 days. Like,
8 hours today. Oh my gosh, what is this nonsense?
yes. No, it's funny. And I hope that everyone listening in here can enjoy the laughter with us, because it's there. But when you realize that people start referring their friends, their family, when the consistency happens, and that was for me one of the big aha moments, because a lot of my associate career was spent through chaos. I switched through many different supervisors. I had some amazing supervisors in the practicum side of my clinical life. But then when it was like trying to get into private practice and maintain a position, and I felt like at a lot of the private practices, I wouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them that I went to, they all would sit down with me. They'd say, we'd love to hire you, but we'd also love to change you. We want to change your look.
You got that a lot.
I want to change your look, want to change the language you use. And it's not even like, oh, warning, I was cussing. It wasn't even that. It was just my childhood growing up. I lived in Illinois. I lived in North Carolina. So I have different phrases and metaphors that aren't standard. And people were like, well, you're not professional enough, and I'll never forget one place said, well, we will hire you, but you need to wear a suit every day you're here. And I remember I went out and I bought 3 suits. And I gave that position every single thing I had. And 6 months later, they called me and said, well, we don't think you're a fit. And they let me go. And there was this moment in my life where I was going home to my wife to tell her that I had lost this job. We were living in a studio apartment. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do next. I was almost at my breaking point of therapy because I had made more money as a mechanic than I was making as a therapist. I wondered if I'd put my eggs all in the wrong basket. And I remember looking at these 3 suits in the closet. It's funny because I've got a closet right to me, so that's why I'm looking at it. I had these 3 suits, and then I remember just telling my wife, I'm sick and tired of trying to be what everyone else wants to be. I want to be myself. And my wife in that moment, she's always been awesome, was like, then stop playing everyone else's game. And it hit me different. Like, okay. And so for a 6-month period, I didn't do private practice. I stopped. I was luckily Hope Counseling Center had let me have a position with Susan Hastings, and I just kept on doing that. And then I'll never forget when I became licensed. I became licensed and I said, I'm going back into private practice. And I had all those gut feelings of like, dude, I'm going to pay for a psychology today that I'm never going to hear from. I'm going to put out brochures and cards and no one's going to call. And there was this moment that happened that I had 3 clients call within 2 weeks and were like cold turkey clients, never had dealt with me, just called. Okay, let's do it. And that was when I started at Cozy, because I didn't even want to rent a space because I didn't believe in myself that much. And then all of a sudden, boom, people call. And what's interesting is when you start getting that feedback from clients of like, where have you been all my life? And again, it's not a humble brag. It's not me. Oh, me. No, it was people were searching for a level of authenticity and genuineness they couldn't find. And that's what my hope is for this podcast and for why we're having this discussion, is because the world needs you. It needs absolutely you. Stop reading books to learn how to change you into something that you're not. Stop thinking of yourself of having a deficit and start looking at all the surplus of things you've got going on in your life, of what you're good at and how you connect. Because I'm telling you right now, I have several clients that say you are my truck driver therapist. And so I laugh at it because they're like, I'll never forget one again. They took a picture and I'm like, what'd you take a picture for? And he's like, because my wife totally doesn't believe you look like a truck driver. Now that could be a good or bad thing, but for him, he needed it that way. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm tired of sitting across from someone clean cut in a suit and feeling like I don't have fancy enough clothes to wear to my therapy session. And it was like,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
oof, all right, here we are.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And if you look at all 3 of us, like I'm like just looking at like just the screen too. Like if you look at our background, just like what we look like, how we talk, the phrases we use, like all 3 of us, we're all different. Like, and there's so many therapists out there. Like clients are going to choose us because they feel comfortable with our style, our personality, because that's just who we are. And it's going to be such a disservice to clients if we try to mold ourselves into somebody else's mold, or what society expects us to be. And so just kind of going back to Vanessa, what would you tell like a brand new trainee who's like, I don't know how to show up in the room. Like, I don't know how to do therapy. Like, what do I do? I'm hearing all these things of what I shouldn't do in the room. Like, what would you tell that person? Like authentic, like honestly, what would you tell them?
I would say get over yourself. Get out of your head and get over yourself and just be. It's not hard to sit with someone in a room and listen, right? So put the toolbox away, put the interventions away, put the theories away, just sit and be present. When you're curious about what your client is saying, naturally you will have questions. Naturally you will have emotion. Naturally, like we're human. Unless you're a sociopath, right? You're going to have emotions and it's gonna be there. It's not hard to have. When you start pulling in the interventions and the theories, that's when you start learning out of that vulnerability and out of that authenticity. Gosh, what theory do I relate to the most? Right? It's not what theory do I want. I thought I liked CBT, but then I realized I'm really not a CBT therapist. Like that's just not who I am. I can use interventions of that. But I would tell a trainee to stop thinking about yourself, like get over yourself, think about what your client, sit with your client, be in a room with your client, listen. And out of that, just be, right? Be mindful. feel the energy. What does your client need through feeling the energy of the room, right? And so I would just tell them to get over themselves. It's not about you.
That's your quote. I like it.
Yeah.
And you nailed it, because what's hysterical is I feel like we're always fighting academia in some way, shape, or form. But what you were saying, and like, get over yourself, is also what you're essentially saying is you have all the power in the room. That as a therapist, whatever I do is going to either be positive or negative in this person's life. Obviously, if they come see me and I don't do the right thing, their life is going to go off the cliff. And I think you have to recognize at some point as a good therapist that you don't hold all the power in the session. In that session, sir, they step into a safe space. They sort of take off the coat of life, and they're able to have an experience of, let's just bare our soul in that situation. But it's only for 50 minutes a week. If lucky, maybe 2 times a week. But in reality, don't overplay how little of effectiveness rate you might actually have with that client. Because you can sit there and talk all day long and hit all the interventions and all the right things, and that client might still smile and nod at you, go home, and not do a single thing you guys talked about. But we don't ever talk about that. We always assume that we are the ones that are going to ruin someone's life.
Yeah.
I think that, go ahead, Vanessa.
No, I just said, well said, Adam.
Oh, yeah, I just think that it's not about us. Like, you are right. Like, get over ourselves, because the person that's going to affect change isn't us. It's going to be them.
Mm-hmm.
We're just there for their journey to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I think you absolutely killed it, Vanessa. You were wondering how this was going to go, and it went really well.
Well, you guys are great. Adam, I miss you. Come back, please.
Yes.
I know we're gonna coffee tomorrow. You guys are great. I love conversations with you on the podcast, off the podcast. I love being able to go to school with you guys and learn, and stuff like that. So you guys are important to me. I love, Adam, that Cozy was a safe, good place for you. That warms my soul. So yeah, I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate you having me on.
So if they wanted to find you, how would people find you?
It's a great question. Okay, so you can find me on my website, VanessaCardinCounseling.com, for therapy. If you're looking for Cozy information, CozyOffices.com. But yeah, I'm around. I'm in Anaheim. Cozy's in Anaheim. I'm in Yorba Linda. And yeah, you can find me on my website.
Well, thank you so much, Vanessa, for taking time out of your day, sitting down with us. And so, for all of you listening, whether you were driving on the way into work or listening when you're surrounded by knee-high terrace or your children, we are here, and we are a place for you to check in, whether you are a pre-licensed clinician, licensed clinician, or an everyday Joe. So thank you so much for what you guys do. Session Well does not exist without you. So have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye. Music in this podcast is sourced through filmmusic.io. The featured track is Energetic Upbeat by WinnieTheMoog, Creative Commons License 4.0. This podcast is copyrighted by Session Well 2021, all rights reserved.